Welcome back to the deep dive. We take complex sources, pull out the key insights, and make them really actionable, really fascinating for you. Today, we are doing a deep dive into, well, one of the most chaotic periods in recent memory, the 2008 financial crisis. And we're looking at it through the lens of Andrew Ross Sorkin's incredible book, Too Big to Fail. It's famous for its amazing access, that minute-by-minute feel. So our mission here is to cut through all that complexity. We want to pull out the really crucial bits of knowledge, give you a solid grasp of what happened, and maybe more importantly, why it still matters so much. This isn't just history class. It's a major case study in risk decision-making under pressure and what it all means for our economy today. Try to picture this. It's September 2008, Lower Manhattan. The feeling is just desperation, fear. The world's biggest financial firms, they're not just shaky, they're actually collapsing, like dominoes, one after another. Investment banks that seemed untouchable are suddenly facing ruin. And the people at the top, the Treasury Secretary, the Fed Chair, the Wall Street CEOs, they are locked in these intense all-night meetings.
Phones practically glued to their heads, making calls that will literally decide the fate of, well, everything. Not just their company, the whole global economy. It sounds like a movie script, right? But this actually happened. Sorkin's book puts you right there, in those frantic rooms, showing how secret decisions impacted billions.
Yeah, and looking back at this through Sorkin's work is so valuable because it's not just history. It really isn't. It's more like a masterclass in understanding how these complex systems, these financial networks, are all tied together, sometimes invisibly. For you, wanting to understand how things really work, where the vulnerabilities lie, this deep dive is a pretty unique opportunity. It helps you spot warning signs, understand the why it matters, and really equip yourself with knowledge that goes beyond just facts. It becomes usable insight.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Let's set the stage for the actual crisis.
Yeah.
Sorkin gives this really vivid picture of Wall Street just before 2008. He calls it years of printing money. It sounds like a time of just almost dangerous confidence. The culture,
Yes.
It was about greed. Huge risky bets weren't just allowed, they were encouraged, rewarded big time.
Absolutely. Big bonuses.
Yeah, exactly. And firms were churning out these super complex mortgage products, getting harder and harder to understand. It seems like everyone, from the top dogs down to the new analysts, genuinely believed the party would just keep going forever.
Yeah.
Profits were through the roof, bonuses were insane, and the risks, well, they're mostly ignored or explained away. It was a boom that blinded people.
And that's the core problem Sorkin lays out so well. This whole environment, it just couldn't last. It was, inflating this massive bubble, and it was going to burst badly. When people talk about toxic assets from that time, what they mostly mean are subprime mortgages, loans to people who, frankly, had shaky credit and often couldn't afford them.
Right.
But the real financial wizardry, or maybe the madness, was how they packaged these things. Imagine thousands of these risky loans all bundled together into something called mortgage-backed securities, MBS.
Oh.
But it didn't stop there. They took these MBS, some really toxic, sliced them up, mixed them together again into even more complex things called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. The result: these products got so complicated, so layered, that nobody really knew the true risk, not even the banks holding tons of them.
So even the banks themselves didn't fully grasp it.
Often, no. Or they chose not to look too closely. Institutions like Lehman Brothers, which became kind of the symbol of the collapse, they were practically drowning in these murky, high-risk assets. It's a perfect storm showing the danger of unchecked growth, prioritizing quick profits over long-term stability, or even transparency.
Okay, so now things start getting really intense. Sorkin's description of the actual collapse is almost moment by moment. You feel the chaos. He shows top government officials, regulators, bank CEOs, pulling all-nighters, running on fumes and caffeine in these Manhattan boardrooms.
Right, high pressure.
You read about Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary, constantly on the phone trying to broker deals, almost begging CEOs to find solutions as everything is crumbling. There are these scenes where leaders are just watching stock tickers plunge, credit markets freeze up solid, realizing that the next few hours could change the world.
Yeah.
It wasn't slow. It was like falling off a cliff, a frantic race against time where every decision felt monumental. Save the world or push it over the edge.
And you really can't overstate how terrifying that was. Sorkin makes it clear it wasn't just about one bank failing, or even a few. The real nightmare scenario was the whole system just unraveling, total systemic collapse.
Because they were all connected.
Precisely, the interconnectedness. If a big player like Lehman went down, it was linked to countless others through, complex contracts, things like derivatives, credit default swaps.
Okay, maybe quickly explain those.
Sure. So derivatives are basically financial contracts whose value comes from something else, like a stock or bond price. Credit default swaps, CDS, are like insurance policies on debt. When the mortgages started failing massively, these CDS, these insurance policies, suddenly became huge liabilities themselves. They magnified the crisis.
Okay. Got it.
So the book shows how one big failure could absolutely trigger a global chain reaction. A U.S. housing problem explodes into a worldwide economic emergency. The fear was incredibly real. It threatened, like Sorkin says, your savings, your job, your house, everything. It wasn't abstract finance anymore. It was hitting everyone.
Right. The foundation was shaking. So the system's on the brink. This leads us to the decisions, these incredibly tough, often secret, definitely controversial choices. Sorkin really pulls back the curtain here. You see the backroom deals, the immense pressure. You've got figures like Hank Paulson trying to hold it all together almost by sheer will, caught between politics, panic, and collapsing banks.
A really difficult position.
Then there's Ben Bernanke at the Fed, weighing risks nobody had faced before, basically inventing new tools for the Federal Reserve on the spot, central banking in crisis mode.
Unprecedented actions, really.
And the bank CEOs, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, Lloyd Blankfein at Goldman Sachs, trying to navigate this storm, protect their own firms, but also, publicly trying to save the system too.
A complex balancing act, for sure.
And what really stands out in Sorkin's telling is the sharp contrast in who got saved and who didn't. Some firms, even though they took massive risks, got rescued. AIG, the giant insurer, got a huge government bailout. Goldman Sachs, too.
They were deemed too big to fail.
Exactly. Their collapse was seen as potentially triggering something even worse. But then others, famously Lehman Brothers, were just left to die. Sorkin details that agonizing weekend trying to find a buyer for Lehman. When they walked away, Lehman filed for bankruptcy, and boom, shockwaves everywhere.
Yeah, that Lehman weekend is a central part of the narrative.
So it wasn't like everyone got help. It was very selective, sometimes political. The amount of money involved, the speed of these decisions under that pressure, it's just staggering to read about.
And this really brings up that huge question, the one Sorkin forces us to grapple with. Who gets saved and who gets sacrificed? It's not just about 2008. It's about the whole idea of too big to fail. What does it mean?
Right. If a company is so big its failure threatens everything, does it play by different rules? Does it essentially have a government guarantee?
Exactly. And this sparked intense debate, even among the people in the room making the calls. As Sorkin shows, there were arguments for letting firms fail. Market discipline, teach a lesson about reckless risk.
The moral hazard argument.
Right. But the counter-argument, the one that often won out, was that the immediate danger of total collapse was just too great. It outweighed the long-term lesson. This whole dilemma points to a potentially broken system. If companies can get so big that we can't let them fail no matter what they did, well, that's a fundamental problem. It forces us to think about that tension. Private profits, but socialized losses when things go bad. And that's still a huge challenge today.
Okay, let's zoom out now. Look at the bigger picture. What makes too big to fail so powerful isn't just the finance, it's the human side. Sorkin hammers home that these closed-door decisions, these frantic calls in Manhattan, they dramatically shape the lives of ordinary people across the world.
Absolutely. It wasn't contained.
We're not just talking numbers on a screen. We're talking about millions of people losing jobs, homes, retirement savings. The ripple effect hit everyone, everywhere. It wasn't just finance. It was this intense, often tragic, human drama. A real reminder that behind the policy and the numbers are actual people's lives.
And building on that, Sorkin's book really crystallizes some key lessons that are just as relevant now as they were then. First, definitely interconnectedness. The crisis just laid bare how fragile the system is. One domino falls, and the whole world feels it. The speed it spread was shocking.
A wake-up call for sure.
Second, you see leadership under pressure. Sorkin gives you this incredible study in character. Some leaders froze up. Others, despite the massive stakes, stepped up and made incredibly tough calls that probably stopped a complete meltdown.
Yeah, you see different styles, different reactions.
Third, and this is still debated heavily, is that idea. Too big to fail. Too big to control. If institutions get so huge their failure is catastrophic, does the system itself need rethinking? It raises big questions about competition, risk, regulation. Should any company be indispensable? Especially if it gets an implicit safety net.
Right. A fundamental challenge.
And finally, maybe the most crucial lesson. Greed isn't free. Sorkin shows powerfully that the relentless chase for profit, ignoring the risks, focusing only on the short term, well, it had consequences far beyond Wall Street. It hit ordinary people hard. It underlines how systemic issues driven by human behavior and incentives have these very real, widespread impacts on all of us.
So where does that leave us now, years on? Too big to fail isn't just history. It feels like a really potent warning. A warning about power, about greed, about how decisions made by a small group, often in private, can change everything for billions. Understanding 2008 isn't just academic, it feels essential. Because, as Sorkin suggests, the specifics might change, the assets might be different next time, but the underlying weaknesses, the human tendencies, they're still here. What happened then? It absolutely could happen again.
Which brings us right to that final, lingering question Sorkin leaves hanging, maybe the most important one for you, the listener, to think about. He asks, essentially, are we ready for the next crisis? Or are we still too big to fail? It's not just looking back, it's a challenge right now. Have we learned enough? Are the safeguards strong enough? What does it mean for the stability of our economy, for your own financial future? It's something we all need to keep thinking about critically and stay engaged with.